Welcome to the third episode of Moon Mountain Mahayana. Today I'm going to introduce in a very rough and superficial way the highly important term Bodhisattva. It's a Sanskrit term and means something along the lines of being of awakening. Now we first encounter this term in the context of Buddha Shakyamuni's previous lives. So he was not a fully realized Buddha yet, but he was on the way towards Buddhahood. Later, with the Mahayana tradition coming into its own, the same term was used in the Sanskrit version to underline a different ideal, focusing on the centrality of compassion and compassionate action. So, of course, that's just a very superficial way of pointing in the right direction, but it'll get you started with the term. In the West, a lot of explanations I encountered like to underline the contrast between what they say the old ideal was and then the new Mahayana ideal. So imagine you're in the best nightclub you could ever imagine, the Studio 54 and the best music, and it's just an amazing, spectacular experience. A lot of amazing, wonderful things are happening, also terrible things are happening. Everybody's caught up in what's happening. And so people don't realize the place is on fire. You realize that. And want to get out ASAP. There's an emergency exit. It's hard enough to get to that emergency exit because the place is packed and people are doing all kinds of strange things. So going to the emergency exit and getting out to, reach nirvana, so to speak, would be a sensible thing. Another more idealistic thing to do would be to do your utmost to get everybody out, and then you'd be so noble as to be the last person or being to leave that burning, amazing spectacle that people are caught up in, which could obviously present a bit of a problem if everybody's super polite and some other people have also taken it upon themselves to be the last ones to leave. Then it could be after you, after you, after you. Now, that does actually kind of express the Mahayana Bodhisattva idea up to a certain point. Of course, ultimately, the best way to really benefit sentient beings is to become a Buddha, ASAP. But these new ideals or just notions are also developed in contrast to the older ideas of practicing to become an Arhat. We always have to keep in mind that throughout the history of Buddhism, or actually throughout the history of all religious traditions that branch off and keep to evolve in the sense that they create new expressions as reactions to what came before and new circumstances. So if we keep that disclaimer in mind, I just want to make sure that a lot of you understand that whilst from a certain point of view, there are good reasons for Mahayana people to criticize what they consider to be Hinayana viewpoints. But to think that a lot of the criticism of earlier Buddhist streams, that some then call Hinayana, that always refers to real historical reality. I mean, we have to be really careful about that. Of course, as Mahayana began to differentiate itself and came into its own, there probably were a lot of, let's call it discussions, and people who strongly disagreed with some of these new focus shifts of all these practitioners who suddenly felt drawn towards a Mahayana approach. But, a couple of hundred years down the line, people like the, much renowned master, let's say Dogen, from my own tradition, they never met any Theravada practitioners. So when they, in their writings, when later Mahayana masters criticize Hinayana, they're kind of criticizing some problematic attitudes, but these attitudes did not necessarily reflect historical reality at the time. Again, we have to look at the details. Some points of criticism might still hold, but then there's loads of criticism coming from the other side, claiming that Mahayana is just all a bit of a crackpot movement that, as nice as it may sound, has no foundation in Buddhist reality. What I want you to understand is Bodhisattva, awakening beings, becoming somebody who is not just focused on one's own awakening and one's own getting out of here, but focused on serving all other sentient beings and developing a boundless, compassionate attitude. That's more the kind of thing we're talking about when we refer to Mahayana Bodhisattvas. And this whole lists with hierarchies, what a first level Bodhisattva can't do, and then there's different levels, which all sounds a bit like Dungeons and Dragons. I would, flip it around and say these types of ideas were probably influenced by older writings that had these level descriptions. I'm sure there's a PhD in there somewhere, but what I'm saying is that there's a general notion of what a bodhisattva is, and that's a being on the path to awakening, wanting to serve and liberate all sentient beings. And then there's, of course, the more scholastic fine print, which is something very, 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 very important too. I'm not trying to dismiss that. So when you read Bodhisattva, it's an awakening being on the path to Buddhahood to help liberate all sentient beings. See you next time.